Everyone had given up hope until the humans came. Antares ducked as a burst of plasma fire seared the air above his head. The stench of ozone and burnt flesh filled his nostrils. All around him, the once proud Sakari capital lay in ruins, buildings reduced to rubble, streets littered with the broken bodies of his fallen comrades. The ruthless Zorlax had finally breached their last line of defense. For centuries, the Sakari had waged a desperate war against the Zorlax, an advanced alien race hell-bent on conquering the Andromeda galaxy. Despite the Sakari's technological prowess and valiant efforts, the Zorlax had slowly but inexorably pushed them back, system by system, planet by planet. Now they stood on the brink of annihilation, making their final stand on their besieged homeworld. Antares gritted his teeth as he fired his plasma rifle at the advancing Zorlak infantry. His squad had been reduced to a handful of exhausted, battle-weary warriors, their once gleaming armor now scorched and dented. They fought with the desperate fury of those who knew they were doomed, but refused to go quietly into the night. As the Zorlax closed in, Antares knew that their time had run out. In a last, desperate gamble, he gave the order to activate the ancient distress beacon, a relic from a bygone era when the Sakari still believed in the possibility of allies. The beacon sent out a pulse of energy, carrying with it a plea for help, a final cry of defiance against the encroaching darkness. Light years away, on a small, insignificant planet called Earth, the distress signal reached the ears of Frank Howard, a grizzled ex-Marine turned mercenary. Frank had seen his share of bloodshed and loss, and now he sought redemption in the depths of space, working for an interstellar mining corporation. When he intercepted the Sakari transmission, Frank knew he had found his chance. He convinced his employer to let him investigate, dangling the prospect of exclusive mining rights and first contact with an advanced alien civilization. With a hand-picked crew of fellow mercs, Frank set out on a perilous journey to the Sakari homeworld, using an experimental wormhole drive to traverse the vast distances between galaxies. They arrived in the midst of chaos, the once proud Sakari capital reduced to a war-torn hellscape. Sleek Sakari fighters clashed with hulking Zorlak warships in the skies above, while on the ground, towering Zorlak war machines laid waste to entire city blocks. Frank's ship, caught in the crossfire, crash-landed on the outskirts of the city. As Frank and his team emerged from the wreckage, they found themselves face-to-face with the brutality of a war unlike any they had ever seen. Advanced alien weaponry flashed and pulsed, leaving trails of destruction in its wake. The humans, with their comparatively primitive technology, suddenly felt very small and very outmatched. Antares, seeing the strange ship crash, dispatched a unit to investigate, assuming it to be Zorlak reinforcements. When they arrived on the scene, they found Frank and his team, battered but alive, struggling to make sense of their surroundings. Antares trained his plasma rifle on the intruders, his battle-hardened features etched with suspicion and mistrust. For a tense moment, the two groups stood locked in a standoff, Frank desperately trying to use his ship's built-in universal translator to convince Antares that they were not his enemy. Just as it seemed that the situation might devolve into violence, a Zorlak war machine crested the horizon, its massive bulk blotting out the sun. In that moment, Frank and his team proved their worth. Moving with a speed and efficiency that belied their human origins, they brought their weapons to bear, pouring fire into the war machine's weak points. The Sakari watched in amazement as the humans, with nothing but guts and ingenuity, brought the behemoth crashing to the ground, saving Antares and his squad in the process. In the aftermath of the battle, as Frank and Antares finally managed to communicate, the stakes became clear. The Sakari were on the brink of annihilation, and if they fell, the Zorlax would gain access to advanced technology and resources that would make them unstoppable. The fate of not just the Sakari, but the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Desperate and out of options, Antares reluctantly agreed to form an alliance with the humans. Frank, seeing a chance to make a real difference, threw himself into the fight with a passion he had not felt in years. He knew that the odds were stacked against them, that the might of the Zorlak war machine far outweighed anything the humans could bring to bear. But Frank also knew that humans had a way of defying the odds, of snatching victory from the jaws of defeat through sheer grit and determination. As he stood beside Antares on a hilltop overlooking the embattled city, watching the Sakari warriors and human mercs preparing for the fight of their lives, Frank allowed himself to feel a glimmer of hope. The road ahead would be long and hard, filled with sacrifice and sorrow. But with human ingenuity and Sakari technology, they just might have a chance to turn the tide, to push back the darkness and save not just the Sakari, but the entire galaxy. It was a slim hope, but it was all they had. And sometimes, that was enough. Frank wiped sweat from his brow as he demonstrated another combat maneuver to a group of Sakari warriors. The alien soldiers mimicked his movements, their forearms flowing gracefully through the motions. Good. Now remember, hit fast and disappear. The Zorlax won't know what hit him, Frank said. Across the training yard, Antares activated a sleek silver device. A shimmering energy field sprang to life around him. This is our latest force field generator, Antares explained. It can absorb multiple plasma blasts before failing. Frank whistled, impressed. That'll come in handy. Speaking of plasma, Antares handed Frank a Sakari plasma rifle. Frank hefted the weapon, marveling at its lightness. Time to put our training to the test, Frank said grimly. We move on the Zorlax supply base tonight. Under cover of darkness, Frank led a mixed squad of humans and Sakari towards the enemy compound. They crept through dense underbrush, their footsteps silent. At Frank's signal, a human sniper took out the perimeter guards with suppressed shots. Sakari tech experts disabled the base's security systems. The squad breached the compound. Frank's blood pumped as they raced through corridors, planting explosives on vital equipment. Jake, watch our six, Frank called out. A plasma bolt sizzled past. Jake spun, firing back at the Zorlak patrol that had stumbled upon them. One of the Sakari soldiers stumbled. A Zorlak took aim. No! Jake shouted. He shoved the Sakari aside as the bolt struck him in the chest. Frank's heart stopped. Jake! He rushed to his friend's side. Jake's breathing was labored, blood seeping from the wound. Leave me, Jake gasped. Frank shook his head. Not a chance in hell. We're getting out of here. All of us. He hoisted Jake over his shoulder in a fireman's carry. Move out. They fled the base as explosions rocked the compound behind them. Frank's muscles screamed under Jake's weight, but he refused to slow down. Back at Sakari HQ, Frank paced outside the medical bay. Antares approached, his expression unreadable. Your subordinate's condition is grave, Antares stated. Why risk the mission for one soldier? Frank's eyes hardened. Because that's what we do. We don't leave our people behind. Antares tilted his head. Even at the cost of the objective? The objective means nothing if we lose our humanity in the process, Frank shot back. Antares was silent for a long moment. Perhaps we Sakari have something to learn from you humans after all. News of the raid's success spread quickly. Frank found himself surrounded by cheering Sakari warriors, eager to join the fight alongside the humans. But as Frank looked out over the war-torn city, his gut twisted. This small victory had come at a steep price, and he knew the real battle was just beginning. Frank wiped sweat from his brow as he surveyed the city's fortifications. Sakari engineers worked tirelessly, erecting massive force field generators around the perimeter. The hum of energy filled the air as the protective barrier flickered to life. How's it looking? Antares asked, his four eyes scanning the horizon. Good, but we need more firepower, Frank replied. He tapped his comm device. Johnson, get your snipers in position. I want eyes on every approach. Copy that, boss, came the reply. Frank turned to Antares. Your force fields will buy us time, but we need to hit them hard and fast when they come. Antares nodded. Agreed. I've positioned our plasma cannons at key intersections. As they spoke, a distant rumble grew louder. The ground trembled beneath their feet. They're here, Frank muttered. The Zorlak war machines crested the horizon, their massive forms blotting out the sun. At their head, a sleek command ship cut through the air. "Zorgoth," Antares hissed. Frank raised his binoculars. "All right, people, this is it. Snipers, light 'em up." A hail of precision fire erupted from hidden positions throughout the city. Zorlak troops fell from their transports, caught off guard by the sudden assault. The force field sprang to life just as Zorgoth's ship unleashed a barrage of plasma fire. The energy dissipated harmlessly against the barrier, but the strain was visible as the field flickered and pulsed. "Now!" Frank shouted into his comm. "Hit and run teams, go!" Human mercenaries on speeder bikes zipped out from hidden tunnels, firing rocket launchers at the Zorlak war machines. Explosions rocked the battlefield as Frank's troops executed textbook guerrilla tactics. Antares coordinated the Sakari defenders, their advanced weaponry complementing the humans' aggressive strategy. The Zorlaks, caught between precision sniper fire and lightning-fast hit-and-run attacks, began to falter. Suddenly, a human rocket team scored a direct hit on Zorgoth's command ship. The vessel lurched, trailing smoke as it plummeted towards the city. "It's crashing inside the force field," Antares exclaimed. Frank's eyes narrowed. "This is our chance. Antares, with me." They assembled a strike team and raced towards the crash site. Zorlak troops poured from the downed ship, engaging in fierce close-quarters combat with the human Sakari force. Frank ducked under a plasma bolt, returning fire with his rifle. He spotted a hulking figure emerging from the wreckage. Zorgoth himself. "There!" Frank shouted, pointing. Antares unleashed a barrage from his four-armed plasma cannon, forcing Zorgoth back into cover. Frank's team pressed forward, laying down suppressing fire. After a brutal firefight, they cornered the Zorlak commander. Zorgoth snarled, his alien features contorted with rage. "It's over," Frank said, his rifle trained on Zorgoth's head. With their leader captured, the Zorlak forces lost cohesion. Frank and Antares coordinated a final push, shattering the alien offensive and sending them into full retreat. In the aftermath, Frank stood before the captured Zorgoth. Antares activated a Sakari mind probe device as Frank began his interrogation. "Why attack the Sakari? What's your endgame?" Frank demanded. Zorgoth resisted, but the combination of Frank's questioning and Sakari technology proved too much. His mind opened, revealing the existence of a massive shipyard and a terrifying plan. "Earth," Frank breathed. "They're coming for Earth next." He turned to Antares, his face grim. "We need to hit that shipyard before they launch their fleet. It's our only chance to end this war." Antares nodded solemnly. "Agreed, but we cannot do it alone." "We won't have to," Frank replied, activating his long-range communicator. "Our reinforcements just arrived in system. Time to bring in the cavalry." As they prepared for the coming battle, Frank couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. Humans and Sakari, once strangers, now brothers in arms. "Ready for this?" he asked Antares. The Sakari warrior's four eyes blinked in sequence. "With you by my side, always." Together, they boarded the transport that would take them to the Zorlak shipyard, knowing the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. Frank Howard stood on the bridge of the human warship Relentless, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of the Zorlak shipyard. The massive structure loomed before them, jam-packed with defense platforms and swarming with enemy fighters. "All ships, prepare to engage," Frank ordered, his voice calm but firm. "Remember the plan. Hit them hard and fast." Beside him, Antares nodded, his four eyes blinking in sequence. "My warriors are ready, Frank. We will not fail." The human fleet surged forward, railguns charging and missile bays opening. Frank gripped the command console as the first salvo erupted from the Relentless. Streaks of light crisscrossed space as human ordnance slammed into Zorlak defenses. Explosions bloomed in silence, bathing the bridge in flashes of orange and white. Frank watched as Zorlak fighters scrambled to respond, their formations chaotic and disorganized. "Now, Antares," Frank said. The Sakari commander touched his communicator. "Stealth squadrons deploy." Cloaked Sakari fighters slipped past the maelstrom of battle, their engines barely a whisper against the void. Frank held his breath as they approached the shipyard's outer perimeter. "Ground team, prepare for insertion," he ordered. Frank led his strike force to the dropship bay. Human mercenaries and Sakari commandos checked weapons and sealed pressure suits. The bay doors opened, revealing the chaos of battle beyond. Their dropship rocketed from the Relentless, weaving through debris and weapons fire. Frank's fist clenched as he gripped the handrail, the ship bucking and shuddering around them. With a bone-jarring thud, they landed inside the shipyard. Frank was first out the hatch, plasma rifle raised. "Move! Move!" They sprinted through corridors, engaging Zorlak security forces in vicious firefights. Human and Sakari tactics meshed seamlessly, Frank's team providing covering fire while Sakari energy weapons punched through Zorlak armor. "Command center ahead," a Sakari scout reported. Frank nodded grimly. "This is it. Let's end this war." They burst into the control hub, catching the Zorlak commanders off guard. Frank ducked under a plasma bolt, returning fire and dropping 2 enemies. "Overload the core," he shouted, gesturing to a Sakari tech expert. The alien's fingers flew over the controls as Frank's team held off waves of Zorlak reinforcements. Alarms blared as systems began to fail throughout the shipyard. "It's done," the Sakari tech yelled. "We have minutes before total collapse." Frank keyed his comm. "Antares, we've done it. Begin final assault." They fought their way back to the landing zone, linking up with Antares and the main Sakari force. Human warships provided devastating fire support, their guns thundering in the vacuum of space. As they lifted off, Frank watched the shipyard's massive structures grind to a halt. Unfinished Zorlak warships drifted lifelessly, their invasion of Earth now nothing but a fading dream. Back aboard the Relentless, Frank's comm crackled with an incoming transmission from Earth. A grin spread across his face as he listened to the message of gratitude and support. He turned to Antares, clapping the Sakari warrior on the shoulder. "We did it, my friend, but this is just the beginning." Antares nodded, his alien features set with commitment. "Indeed, the real fight starts now." Together, they bent over a star chart, already planning their next move against the reeling Zorlak forces. Frank Howard stood on the bridge of the Relentless, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of Corvallis. The Sakari colony world hung in space, a blue-green jewel marred by the ugly scars of Zorlak occupation. "All ships, prepare for warp jump," Frank ordered, his voice steady. "We hit them hard and fast." Beside him, Antares' 4 eyes blinked rapidly. "My family is down there, Frank. We must succeed." Frank nodded, clasping his friend's shoulder. "We will." The Alliance fleet burst into real space, catching the Zorlak garrison completely off guard. Human warships unleashed a devastating barrage, their railguns punching through Zorlak defenses with ease. "Drop pods ready, sir," a young lieutenant called out. Frank strapped himself into a pod, his pulse quickening. "Let's do this." The pod shot from the Relentless, plummeting through Corvallis' atmosphere. Frank's teeth rattled as the pod screamed towards the surface. With a bone-jarring impact, they crashed through the roof of the Zorlak command center. Frank burst from the pod, plasma rifle blazing. Zorlak soldiers fell before him, caught completely by surprise. His team fanned out, securing the room with practiced efficiency. "Control hub, 2 levels down," Frank barked into his comm. "Move!" They fought their way through narrow corridors, Zorlak bodies piling up in their wake. Sakari stealth troops materialized from thin air, their energy blades slicing through enemy armor. Frank ducked under a plasma bolt, returning fire. The last Zorlak guard fell, and they burst into the control hub. A Sakari tech expert immediately set to work, his fingers flying over alien controls. "Defensive grid disabled," the Sakari reported. "Alliance forces are landing now." Outside, the sounds of battle intensified. Frank led his team back to the streets, where they linked up with Antares' forces pouring into the city. Block by block, they pushed the Zorlaks back. Elite shock troopers put up fierce resistance, their heavy weapons tearing through buildings and vehicles alike. Frank saw good soldiers fall, human and Sakari alike. As they cleared a residential sector, Frank's blood ran cold. The buildings had been converted into makeshift prisons, crammed with emaciated Sakari civilians. "My God," Frank breathed, surveying the horrific scene. "Antares needs to see this." They pressed on, freeing prisoners as they went. Intel from liberated Sakari led them to a heavily fortified compound on the outskirts of the city. "This is it," Frank said, studying the facility's defenses. "Antares' family is in there, along with who knows how many others." They launched their assault under the cover of an orbital bombardment. Frank's team breached the outer walls, fighting tooth and nail through waves of Zorlak guards. Alarms blared as they penetrated deeper into the prison. Frank's ammunition ran low, and fatigue set in. Just as it seemed they might be overwhelmed, a familiar war cry rang out. Antares burst onto the scene, his forearms wielding energy weapons with deadly precision. His warriors surged forward, their rage palpable. Together, they fought through the final defenses. Frank blasted the lock off a massive cell door, revealing hundreds of Sakari prisoners. Antares rushed forward, embracing his children, but his moment of joy was short-lived as he realized his mate was not among them. A freed prisoner approached, her voice heavy with sorrow. "I'm sorry, Antares. She didn't make it." Antares let out a primal roar of anguish that shook the very walls. His grief quickly turned to fury as he turned to face the remaining Zorlak forces. "No mercy!" Antares bellowed, charging back into battle. His warriors followed, their vengeance terrible to behold. Frank and his team struggled to keep up as Antares cut a bloody swath through the city. The remaining Zorlaks were pushed back to their final stronghold, a heavily fortified bunker at the heart of the colony. As they prepared for the final assault, Frank's comm crackled to life. "Sir, we're detecting a massive energy buildup in the bunker. It's some kind of doomsday device." Frank's blood ran cold. "We need to shut it down now." They fought their way into the bunker, racing against time. Sakari techs worked feverishly to disable the device as Frank and Antares held off waves of desperate Zorlak defenders. With seconds to spare, the techs succeeded, but not before the device partially activated, unleashing a shockwave that leveled buildings for miles around. As the dust settled, Frank surveyed the devastation. The Zorlaks were defeated, but at a terrible cost. Antares stood amid the rubble, cradling his children. Frank approached his friend, words failing him. They stood in silence, the weight of victory and loss hanging heavy between them. A priority message from Earth broke the moment. Frank listened, his expression darkening. He turned to Antares, his voice grim. "We've got a problem. Earth is pulling support. We're on our own now." Antares nodded slowly, his alien features unreadable. "What do we do now, my friend?" Frank gazed out over the ruined city, the enormity of their task settling on his shoulders. "I don't know, Antares, but whatever we decide, we do it together." They stood amidst the ruins of Corvallis, the fate of two peoples resting in their hands.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.